Here's an example where we're graphing y equals 4 cosine 3 parentheses x plus pi over 6 plus 3. So, how do we go about graphing something like this? Well, let's look at the instructions, the notes I gave you for graphing sine or cosine. First, rewrite the equation by distributing whatever's inside. So let's do that. Let's come up here and we will take this 3 and distribute like that. So we'll get y equals 4 cosine 3x 3 times pi over 6 plus 3. So I took that 3 right there and I distributed to the x and the pi over 6, and then this is 3 over 1, so this cross cancels, doesn't it? So we end up with 4 cosine of 3x plus pi over 2 plus the 3 on the outside. So there we go. There's our equation. Let's bring that down here. 3, oops. No, it's not 3, is it? It's 4. 4 cosine of 3x plus pi over 2 plus 3. Okay, so we have our function. Now, what's the next step? Then we compare to the general form with the a, b, c, and d and identify a, b, c, and d. So let's do that. So the general form is y equals a cosine or sine bx plus c plus d. So we can easily tell what a, b, c, and d are now. Next step, find the midline, which is the d. D is the middle of the graph. So the d is positive 3, so this is the middle. This is the middle of the graph, plus 3. It's the midline. Maybe I should call it the midline, because I want you to know it's vertical middle. It's the midline of the graph. So at y equals plus 3, at up 3 is the middle of this graph. So right there, I'm going to put the middle in. I'll write it over here. So that's the middle, or I'm going to call it the midline. The midline of the graph. And then from there, the instructions say from the middle, the a value is how it rises and how it goes down from the middle. So whatever the a is, the amplitude, that's how far the graph rises and goes down from that middle. So that way you can find the top and the bottom. You can see it on the graph here, right? The minus 3 is the middle line, and then it goes down 5 and up 5 because of that 5 in the front. So you can find the top and the bottom of the graph. That's what that diagram is showing. So let's do that. And so let's, RA is 4. So that means we're going to go up 4 and down 4. So if I go up 4, I'm at 7. If I go down 4, I'm at negative 1. So there's the top and the bottom of our graph. I'm going to put in a top line and a bottom line, kind of make like a window in which I'm going to put the graph, in which our graph lives. So here's the top of the graph, and here is the bottom of our graph. All right. In fact, why don't I get rid of some of that? There we go. All right. So now from there, well, there was no need to do that, I guess. It's the midline. Okay, so we have the middle, we have the top and the bottom. What's next for our graphing purposes? Let's come down here. We have the period. Period is 2 pi over b, and the horizontal shift is minus c over b. So we got to grab those things. So the period, 2 pi over b. So that's 2 pi over 3. B is 3 right there. So that was good. And the horizontal shift, the sideways shift, formula is minus c over b. So minus c pi over 2 over b, which is 3. You know how to handle fractions over fractions. You grab the 1 on the bottom, which is really 3 over 1. You flip it up to multiply upside down, because dividing and multiplying are upside down operations. That gives us minus pi over 6. That means left, right? The minus sign means left, pi over 6. So the horizontal shift is left pi over 6. So now it's time to think about what our graph is generally going to look like. Remember the different graphs and what they look like. So maybe it'd be best to do it right over here. So a positive sine graph starts in the middle, goes high, goes low, back to the middle. A negative sine graph starts in the middle, goes low, goes high, back to the middle. A positive cosine graph. Now, cosine graphs do not start in the middle. They start high or low. So it'll start high, go low, back high. A negative cosine graph starts low, goes high, goes back low. So what do we have? We have a positive cosine graph. So we're looking at this model where we're going to start high, go low in the middle, and finish high. All right, so we start high. And where do we start? We start right here. This is where we start at x equals minus pi over 6. So at minus pi over 6. So our graph is going to begin. In fact, let me get rid of this. This is kind of getting in the way a little bit. And I'll try to put back these lines where they were. There we go. Okay. So where is our graph beginning? Minus pi over 6, which is right here and there. Is that right? No, oh, he's supposed to start high, isn't he? Okay, my mistake. Right there. There we go. Because that's at minus pi over 6. See the x-axis down here? This is minus pi over 6. This is 0. Right? This is the x-axis. You can tell the x-axis there. That, let me fill that in for us a little bit. This right here is the x-axis. So, okay, so our graph starts high, goes low, finishes high. So it starts high at minus pi over 6, because at x equals minus pi over 6 is where it starts. And it starts high, and we know the top is 7 up there. So there it is, at minus pi over 6, it starts up at 7. And now its period is 2 pi over 3. Remember what that is? That's the width of one cycle. So where is it gonna end its first cycle? How do we find that? Well, wherever it starts plus the width of one cycle, which is called the period. So where does it start? Well, right here, x equals minus pi over 6 plus what's the width of one cycle? The period. Right there, 2 pi over 3. So that's how you find where it's going to end its first cycle. And so how do we do that? Well, you know, multiply top and bottom by 2 to make a common denominator of 6. So we get minus pi over 6 plus 4 pi over 6. Well, this is minus 1. So 4 minus 1, 3 pi over 6, which is pi over 2, right? 3 goes into 6 2 times. So it's pi over 2. So that is where it's going to end its first cycle, at pi over 2. Right? See how we figured that out? You find out where it starts and how wide the cycle is. So you take the starting point and how wide the cycle is, add those together, and you know where it's going to end that first cycle, at pi over 2. It ends at pi over 2. So it starts the first cycle at negative pi over 6. It ends the first cycle at pi over 2. So pi over 2 right here. So from here to here is the first cycle. In other words, and that width, the width of that is the period. It's the width of a cycle. Okay, so and it ends, remember this graph starts high, ends high. So boom, right there. Right, that's the general form we're looking at. And it goes to low in between. What's right in between those? How many jumps we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 2. So right. This would be right there, wouldn't it, at the bottom? That's low in the middle. And the halfway, it's here and there. So I think we have got the general graph. It's going to go like this, very steep here, and come like that, and come up, and go like that. And then it's just going to repeat that forever to the left and the right. But we just focus on one period to get that. So do you see how we got all that information? We found the horizontal shift back pi over 6. We know it starts high, finishes high. We found the ending of the first cycle at pi over 2. That was maybe part of the trickiest there. One of the trickiest parts. First cycle ends at where you start plus the width, the period. So where it starts plus the width, and we get pi over 2. And so there's one cycle, and just keeps doing that forever to the left and the right. We've got one cycle. So when you use that tool, the graphing tools, just focus your attention as you're adjusting that graphing tool to make sure this point is accurate at back pi over 6 up 7, and this point is accurate at over pi over 2 up 7, and the rest will all fall in place. There we go.